Greetings, travelers. Today I'll be talking about an interesting topic, one named fate. Fate is something that's commonly thrown around as a word, along with words like fortune telling, seeing the future. The only real thing you need to know about fate is that it doesn't exist as long as you don't let it. I can't tell you the number of times that I've defied my own fate, interrupted a prophecy, killed the chosen one, destroyed in an indestructible world. All of these things are subconscious limitations that prevent you from acting. In general, the more powerful the limitation, the more powerful the effect. So, for example, if the limitation is that this one person cannot be killed until a specific date 1,000 years in the future, that is a pretty significant limitation. And, well, it's a pretty significant effect. You won't see that guy dying anytime soon. Now you may be wondering, why won't this guy be dying if I just said that fate isn't real? Well, the thing about the fate is that it's just a group subconscious effort. It's not well known, but pretty much everybody has a small amount of mystical power, magical power, psychic power, something of the sort. And if enough people believe in something, it enforces that into the world. This is just a subconscious effect. So, in theory, if someone tells everyone in the world that they are immune to all damage, and somehow they get them all to believe it, it might actually become true. Of course, it's unrealistic to achieve this in almost all cases. Generally, a subconscious belief has to be intertwined in species of the planet. This is something 8 million years ago everyone believed that inside of darkness there was danger and supernatural creatures. And then 8 million years later, when time has passed, there are in fact supernatural creatures in the dark. Now, one thing I should mention is that it is possible that this isn't a direct effect of the subconscious mystical power. There is a chance, from another vein of thought, that actually all of these fate like, prophecy like things are just enactments of everyone in the current, past, and future, subconsciously acting on their belief directly, personally. For example, if everyone believes that this one person is not going to die due to some ancient prophecy, they might all subconsciously hold back, knowing that it's impossible to kill them. Something like that could enforce a seasoned prophecy. Now it's time to go on to a bit more specific tellings from some pasts that I have heard of or participated in. There are people that, as I mentioned before, try to enact fate themselves. Now, it's nearly impossible to do this in a standard lifetime. You won't see anybody that's mortal achieve anything similar to anything I discuss here. But there are some generally horrible people to be around that achieve this. I say horrible people to be around because the type of people that want to enact a form of prophecy are generally doing it for some overarching goal that is so absurd that you just don't want any part of it, of course. Or it's something that they are just a twisted piece of work that really, really wants control of everything. And what's better than controlling everything than a prophecy? So, I'll be speaking down about a lot of these people, and I want you to understand the fact that I am truthful in everything that I say, as I always am. So, one part of my past, there was, let's just call this one person Fortuna, because it sounds like fate. Fortuna here is not necessarily immortal at this point, but they've managed to achieve a lifespan somewhere in the tens of thousands of Earth years. And, well, they decided that they want to become the god of their own world. Now, this is more common than you might think. Lots of people like the idea of godhood. I'm going to go on a short tangent here, but put simply, you shouldn't do that. Becoming a god is tying you down to a location place and allows people to target you and your points of power very easily. Gods gain power through the number of followers or the places of power directly associated with them. Now, these places could be more metaphorical. A god of pilgrimages, like I mentioned in a previous discussion, it's the pilgrimages that would need to be targeted, not something physical. Not the location of the pilgrimage, not the actual pilgrimagers. It's the pilgrimage that would need to be affected. And if all pilgrimages stopped, that god would maybe not cease to exist, but lose significant power and rely upon those minor pilgrimages that people do in their everyday lives. So don't tie yourself down to any form of power unless you are forced into it or you don't have a better choice. I am naturally amazing and you can't all follow me. But if you do become a god, I would highly suggest getting a backup plan so you don't solely rely on it. Now, this backup plan would naturally be distancing yourself from godhood. Eventually, you're immortal. You've got time if you're a god. Of course, you should build up power, but build up a separate, sturdy pillar of your own strength. This pillar should be something other than godhood. You could venture into other worlds, take their systems of powers, or naturally, like myself, develop your own. Developing your own is naturally the best, since you're not replicating another's success, you're replicating just your own. So it's more suited to you and naturally become far more powerful. Of course, that takes a lengthy effort by most people, and you won't see it happen very quickly. But once again, you're a god, you've got time. But of course, people might kill you first, so you should do something easier, which is relying on a source of power, or worst case, you can get a separate pillar of your godhood. If you're a god of pilgrims and pilgrimages, you can instead take something completely out of left field, get something very nice, also become the god of computers. It's very hard to target those combined. Targeting them together is very unlikely. They'd have to do two whole separate things. It's a lot harder to plan around. Trust me, I've tried and it's difficult. Well, going back to Fortuna. Fortuna wanted to become a god, so she naturally, over the course of around 10,000 years, put that into the minds of everyone. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing if they're potentially a good god or the methods they use are decent. But they decided to become the god of fate on that world. And if you didn't know, all gods of fate are horrible people to be around. Once again, same reasons. They want to control everything, they want to do everything themselves, they want everybody to listen to them, and if nobody follows their own fate, they start targeting them. It's a whole mess. If you ever go to a world with somebody that controls fate and you are altering what should be your quote unquote fate, you should immediately hide yourself, otherwise, they will target you and will do that for a very long time. They're the type of people that like to hold grudges because, they laid out this grand plan for you and you broke it. So, the methods that Fortuna used were a bit harsh, though, for most. Fortuna started off by being a god of misfortune. At least that was the plan. It's a lot easier to become a bad god than a good god, since in order for people to empower you, they just need to fear you, some metaphysical enactment of your power. If you want to become a god of fear, if everyone fears you, it's a lot easier because you gain power through the fear. You can create a nice cycle of that. A god of good has to do something a lot more intense and studied and practiced. Now, their base power is a lot easier since you don't have to constantly have people in fear. A god of fear that has people stop fearing them just dies off. But a god of good and healing, there's always going to be people that want healing, so good luck trying to kill that god. Of course, then it's just a godhood that people want to take, and that can be a cause of its own problems. What? This video is not about wars of gods. This video is about fate gods and fate itself. So, fate once again. Fortuna starts causing people misfortune directly. Now, this is going to be something like, oh, I sense in your future a great evil will befall your family. All 7 of your children, except your daughter, shall die horrible deaths, and your daughter shall overcome this challenge and kill her whole village. And then she spends the next decade enacting all of that very sequentially, killing off all the sons, and then the daughter comes along, putting some thoughts into her mind directly, mental contamination stuff. This gradually ramps up until people become aware that this fortune teller tells very, very good fortunes, but they're all evil. And then she shifts it a bit. She secretly creates a different persona, which is the apprentice of the fortune teller, strays off the story a bit. So there's the evil fortune teller that she's pretending to be. And then now she's pretending to be this nice, young, pretty, bright fortune teller that's good for everyone. This fortune teller is fighting against her master to save the world with her fortunes. She will naturally tell some bad fortunes, as it's good to know what bad things happen to you, but she foretells great things in the future, and her greatest fortune telling skill of date, her greatest act of will, has been to foretell her own ascension to godhood. If we follow this fortune teller, we will be satisfied in the palace of the gods along with her, as blessed souls accepting into her embrace. Now you can see the ethical ramifications of this. Pretending to be someone evil, causing a bunch of bad things for a couple of centuries, millenniums, and then taking up on an apprentice, that's yourself, and solving all problems that you yourself caused is ethically dubious at best. You could arguably say that the means justify the ends if you do good eventually, but I probably don't need to say this since I've talked about how bad all these fake guys are. They're not doing that. Once a fake god comes into play, they start controlling the world. Fortuna here started creating a bunch of fate strands that are essentially, first off, preventing anyone else from getting close to godhood, but then everything else is just tied down. She didn't want any advancements in technology. She wanted everybody to constantly be afraid of fortunes, to constantly be asking her for fortunes so they can know what to do with their life. It was quite frankly a boring world to be in. Just repetitive. Sure, you could argue the fortunes were a bit different, but over time, a couple 100 years, it gets very, very, very similar. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this, since that world no longer exists, you may have tied it back to the start there, but I destroyed the world, of course. Sometimes when a god is so deeply entwined in a world, they've already reached the peak of their power, so they try to expand to different worlds. This is a lot more difficult since all the different worlds naturally have their own personal godhoods, power systems, all of that stuff. But, Fortuna was powerful, pretty much the only person of power on her world, and, well, was invading one of my worlds. I didn't take too kindly to that, so I did my centuries long investigation, set up some defenses back home. Not mere phrase. I already had defenses back home, and they were far better than anything she could penetrate. So I investigated. I naturally saw that Fortuna was kind of just some dumb fake god that's causing problems, like always. And then I naturally resolved that. But since fate is so entwined into that world, the only god, you're not going to easily solve that. And I'm not going to spend more than a couple thousand years on issues like this, since that just cuts into my time. I've got other things to deal with. So, after my investigations, I simply learned that I could easily overpower her, but that's actually not something you want to do with such a good material as this. This God of Fate is, well, it's a nice thing to use to easily have fate bypassing abilities in other places. You wear Bead of Fate as an amulet. This Bead of Fate is just a conglomeration of all of the gods' power. The world, too, of course, world core and gods meshing together. So you can't just create something like that by killing the god and destroying the world. That's how you get poor. You gotta be rich, like me, and get your own resources. So the thing you gotta do is to create inverses. I had to spend 3,826 years essentially reversing every strand of fate that she ever created. Slowly at first, but ramping up and ramping up. That way, gradually across the subconscious of all the citizens of the world, fate doesn't have as much meaning anymore. But since it's so directly entwined into the world, that started causing cracks and destruction, and you can see where this is going. I used my great refining skills, put them all together, and created one of the best artifacts I have. The reason I'm telling you this is because this artifact is pretty much well known. It's kind of hard to hide something that powerful, and it's pretty easy to tell that I have powers to avoid fate. I mean, I can avoid fate without it, but it just makes it easier, you know. You don't want to spend any percentage of your power, no matter how small, avoiding something that can be done by a crafted material, an amulet, a ring, something of the sort. So, that is essentially what happens to fate gods all the time, at least when I see them. Very nice to have. There are other uses, of course. You can do something similar to enforcing your own fate in other worlds. You want something good to happen to you, you can spend some of its power to increase the luck for yourself. But you should know that once you become powerful enough, luck isn't something that you should rely on or trust in any reasonable capacity. There's so many ways to deal with luck, increase your luck, decrease other people's luck. You should just cut yourself off from luck whenever possible. Become your own source of power and luck. No, let me rephrase that. Don't become your own source of luck. Just don't have any interaction with it. You should cut yourself off from it, similar to how an immortal cuts himself off from dying from time. Once it's no longer part of you, it's not something to worry about anymore. And you can't always have good luck. And now I'll end this nice story on a bit of some ethical methods, since I know some of you listeners and viewers are going to be worried about, oh, he destroyed the entire world. How horrible. This guy is definitely an evil person. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm not evil, but I'm not purely evil, you know? You gotta stay neutral. If you're too good, evil people go after you. If you're too evil, evil people go after you. You gotta stay somewhere in the middle. Now, I will say I do got an excuse for this one. First off, the benefit I got from it was amazing. And second off, I saved about 10% of the population. Since they were great research subjects, I researched them and their effects on fate to greatly improve my own abilities at deflecting fate. And they're living fine. I created my own separate, smaller world for them, and anytime I need to improve my fate skills, I can go back there and alter it. That's actually where I'm currently storing my fate that I got from killing that one goddess. It's just, I got something better recently. It basically allows me to keep them in a constant cycle of good luck and bad luck. It's not as bad as it sounds. It's more minor things, because it's the minor things that are difficult. You can easily give somebody super bad luck or super good luck. Minor changes over time, that's how you alter stuff. Yeah, but I can go there and study, and then I've got alternate selves of mine recording, keeping track of everything that happens, and of course, occasionally, if I feel good, I might lend it out for a pretty penny to someone else if they need to improve their own skills in that regard. And for the other 90%, well, what can you do? The unfortunate souls. I did take their souls, of course, that's a good resource. Well, that's all for today. Once again, keep on listening. You know you need it. You definitely need it, and you should keep on listening.